the guy that he had all these crops, and so he builds these big storehouses so he can fit all the crops in. He says, okay, now I can sit back and relax and just enjoy all my money, basically, and I got plenty to live off of, and I don't have to worry about stuff. And then God says to him, you fool, this very night your life's going to be demanded from you. And God says, that's great, you've got all this stuff stored up, but I'm going to take your life this evening. And we talked about how God can take our lives at any second. Well, that very Sunday, as I was preaching here, there was another pastor, George Hidalgo, who was preaching in Hollywood, Hispanic church, 35 years old. He's preaching, and he starts getting really tired as he's preaching, and so much so that he can't even continue, and he finishes his message, or he doesn't finish his message, he has to go sit down. And so his wife takes him to the hospital. He wasn't the type of guy that normally would go, but he says, all right, it seems like a really bad flu or something like that. Goes to the hospital, and they say it's leukemia. And it was so bad that Sunday, after he went into the hospital, by that evening, by Monday morning, he was on life support. And he died Monday night. I thought, no way. 35 years old, you start feeling like a flu or something, go in the hospital. A few hours later, you're on life support, and then boom, your life is over. At any moment, God can say, it's time. I got an email just a few weeks ago. I got an email from a friend of mine in Kansas that said, pray for my son. His son was 19, 20 years old, and he was having a hard time breathing. About 15, 20 minutes later, I get another email. Never mind, he died. They did an autopsy on his body, and they can't find anything. So we don't know. We don't know why he stopped breathing. It doesn't make any sense. Just happen. There's so many things that can go wrong with the human body at any second. And if not that, there's just so many freak accidents you hear about all the time. And if you sat there and just really thought about all the ways you could die, you just freak out. I mean, you think about a couple of years ago, that girl that goes to a hockey game, and the hockey puck comes flying out and killed her. Or right here in Simi Valley, a guy's playing tennis at Oak Ridge. And a tree falls over and kills it, playing tennis. And how many car accidents, motorcycle, Harley accidents, whatever, just every day you just start going, man, can I do anything? How many diseases could be in my body right now? Or, any internal organ that just would stop functioning, and it's over. And to take that seriously, and yet at the same time, what Jesus says in the very next breath in Luke 12, verse 22 is, he goes, don't worry about your life, though. Don't worry about it. He tells his disciples, but don't worry about it. God can take your life at any second, but don't worry. There's no need to worry. He says in Luke 12, verse 22, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life. Don't worry about what you'll eat. Don't worry about your body, what you're going to wear. Life is more than food, and the body is more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They don't sow, they don't reap. They don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? He goes, look, if you worry, are you going to add another hour to your life? Can you? If you tried really, really hard, though, could you live an hour past what God intends for you to live? No, if you really tried, though. Okay? I mean, the whole point is, he goes, don't worry about it. Okay, God set a time. Your life's going to be over. It's over. He goes, just don't worry about it. And he tells his disciples, remember earlier he was talking about greed with all of these, these crowds. Don't get greedy, don't get greedy. Now he talks to his disciples, he says, and he tells them, and you guys, don't worry. Don't worry about food. See, because these are guys that gave things up to follow Jesus. They didn't have anything. They're standing with Jesus probably in the middle of nowhere, just going, man, where am I going to get food tomorrow? He told us not to bring any money. We don't have any money. We don't have any, extra clothes. We don't have anything. I mean, can you imagine if you're someplace without anything, no money, no provisions, what are you going to think about? What am I going to eat? Jesus says, don't worry about it. He tells his disciples, don't even worry about it. He goes, you see those birds in the air? You see those ravens? Picture in your mind right now a bunch of crows flying around. He goes, look at those crows. You think they're all like saving up for retirement? They got this big storehouse, this barn. They're all worried, am I going to have enough? Am I going to have enough? No. They're just going, they're just doing whatever. He goes, think, if God, he gives them this picture of here's God sitting above the world. And how he orchestrates everything so beautifully, and how, this bird's going to eat that worm, and someone else is going to eat that bird, and and just how everything is provided for in his economy of things. And he says, look, you believe in your Father. You're one of his children. If he's going to care for the birds that way, and he feeds the birds, then don't worry about it. It's not like he doesn't notice you. He notices even the birds of the air, and you're so much more valuable. Just don't worry about it. Just don't worry about what you're going to eat. And let's face it, what he's telling the disciples is a lot easier than what he's telling us. Some of us worried about stuff this week. Okay? Some of you guys stressed out about finances this week. You thought about it a lot this week. How you're going to make ends meet, this or that. But were you really worried about whether you're going to be able to eat? I mean, honestly, he's telling his disciples who don't even have food, don't worry about what you're going to eat. You can imagine what he would say to us. We're not worried about living. We're worried about a standard of living, right? We're worried about what we eat, what kind of food, what kind of clothes. I mean, when you say, I don't have a thing to wear, do you really mean you don't have a thing to wear? No, you mean you don't like what you have to wear and you want to go buy some more new things to wear. But when they said they didn't have a thing to wear, they didn't have a thing to wear. And God says, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. I'll give you the food. I'll give you the clothes. See, our worrying, many of us stress about money. We worry about stuff. We worry about provisions, but it's not really provisions. It's about a standard of living. We're thinking, oh no, is my standard of living going to drop next year? Am I going to be able to afford all this stuff next year? Or maybe I'll have to eat worse food or worse clothes or whatever else. Have a smaller house, a lesser car. We worry about these things. Maybe I'll even have to walk somewhere, I mean, this is the stuff that stresses us out. Or we're stressing about, well, maybe I can get there to where these guys are. Maybe I can move into that neighborhood and drive that car. And we're thinking about this stuff. And we're worried about this stuff. And God says, don't worry about it. Learn to rest in the sovereignty of God. Learn to rest and say, you know what, maybe God's going to see fit that I have to lower my standard of living next year. And to say, that's fine. It's just stuff. If that's what God wants for me, maybe there's a lesson for me to learn, I'll just flow with it. I'll enjoy it. Or maybe he's going to bless me next year with a lot of financial, blessing. And I'll get to figure out where I'm going to allot it all and give it to who and this or that. Great. If that happens, that's great. But it doesn't really matter. God's in control. And either way, I'm just not going to think about money that much. I'm not going to worry about it that much. I have a tendency to stress. I have a tendency toward just worrying about everything. As long as I can remember, that's been a struggle of mine. I just worry about problems or worry about problems that might happen or this or that. And I don't know if you can relate to that. Some of you probably can, or you're living with someone who is like that. You worry. And you know what helped me so much? Because I used to just kind of write it off and go, that's just my personality. What helped me was when I realized that worrying is a sin. Because God tells me specifically, don't worry. He says specifically in Scripture right here, do not worry. He says it in Philippians 4, do not be anxious about anything. And it helped me a lot when I realized worrying is not an option. I just can't do it. Every time I'm about to stress about something, I've got to stop right there because I'm sinning against God. And I tell you, you can change. And it's a great way to live when you don't stress and don't worry about stuff, especially finances. Just go, okay, well, you know what? God has a reason for it. Let me just move on. Let me not worry about it. And let me just move on. It's a great way to live. Remember, God's commands are for our good. It's not like God's saying, no, I'm going to destroy their lives. And you're going, man, God, I love worrying. Why would you take away the one thing I love? No, he's going, no, if you can get rid of this, life is going to be so much better. And we don't worry, and we can be like the birds of the air and go, you know what, God's going to protect them. He'll take care of me. I'll have food. I'll have clothes. And if he decides I should live off of less, I'll live off of less. But big deal. A great illustration of not worrying about life was just, 3 weeks ago. There was a girl in our church, a friend of ours, who she got some sort of disease. She didn't know what it was. No one knew what it was. Her white blood count started going really high, and the doctors were getting concerned about that. It seemed like cancer. It seemed like that's kind of what it was leaning toward. And they started to see a growth inside of her and this or that. But still, it was an unknown thing, and they couldn't nail it. They couldn't pinpoint it. Meanwhile, she's getting sicker and sicker. You know, my wife gives her a call, and just to see how she's doing. And her response was amazing. She says, Lisa, what's the worst thing that could happen? I find out that it's cancer, that I'm going to die and go to heaven? Is that the worst thing that could happen to me? She says, sure, I'd be sad for my husband and my kids, but God will take care of them. And just the peace of going, really, I'm okay. I am totally okay right now. What's the worst thing that could happen? Really, the worst thing that could happen is I get better and live on the earth longer, you know? I mean, really, just to have that perspective, you know, like Paul who says, look, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. So when we start really thinking that way, we just go, you know, what is there really to worry about? What is there to be concerned about? God wants us to live lives where it's just absent of worry. If God sees fit, things are going to happen, and we just roll with it. He goes on in verse 27. And he says, look at the lilies. Let's consider how the lilies grow. They don't labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? Okay, think about flowers. Okay, get the crows out of your head. And now, just picture, okay, you ever try to remember if you've ever seen a field full of wildflowers? Okay, you ever driven up the grapevine like in springtime, you know, and just see just those mountains and the hills? I mean, it's brilliant. It's amazing, just the colors. But picture the most fascinating field you've ever seen of flowers that just grew there in the wild. Jesus says, look at that. Look how beautiful that is. See how beautiful it is? He says, Solomon, King Solomon, the richest man on earth, when he was decked out in all his clothes, all his gold, all his glory, he says, even then you would look at him and go, okay, that's a cute outfit, but look at that field. You know, look at God's creation. Look at the beauty of it. He says, if God made that so beautiful, you think he's going to look at you and say, yeah, but I'm not going to give you clothes to wear? He goes, don't worry about it. If God clothes the flower of the field and he's looking over even the flowers to make them so beautiful, flowers are going to be here today and then they're burned up tomorrow. He goes, why would you worry about your life? God's going to take care of you. He says, oh, you of little faith. The thing is you just don't really believe there is a God sitting over this world watching over you. They didn't have the faith, so they had to worry. They had to think it was for themselves. They had to take care of themselves. But verse 29, he says, and do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. He says, don't set your heart. Don't get focused on what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear. Don't get focused on stuff. Don't think about it. That's all it means. Don't think about it so much. He goes, because that's what the people in the world do. The people who don't believe in God, they think about their stuff. Why? Because they have nothing else to think about. I mean, seriously, if you don't believe in God, what else are you going to do with your life? You're going to try to get as much stuff as you can, try to have as much fun as you can on this earth. You're going to try to look as good as you can, do all these things to your face, your body, everything else, and try to look young as long as you can and live as long as you can, because this is all you got. Trying to get all this stuff and enjoy it, because there's nothing more than that. See, but he wants those of us who believe in God to be different. And to know that we've got this treasure in this relationship with God that is so great that the stuff really doesn't matter to us. We don't go running around and we've got to hold on to it, we've got to grab it. We're not stressed about, man, am I going to eat or this?